This podcast has been brought to you by GM Moving, part of Greater Sport. We're here to help the people of Greater Manchester get moving and to improve lives through physical activity.
Hi, so I'm Eve Holt. I'm the Student Director at GM Moving. So this is about us sharing ways of moving, learning, leading and staying connected during the COVID crisis. So I'm really pleased to be joined by Sarah today, who's one of our trustees at Greater Sport and is doing some fantastic work to help disabled people stay active, both with us at Greater Sport and in her own day job. So go on, Sarah, reintroduce yourself and a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay, I'm Sarah Brown-Fraser. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager for Activity Alliance. Activity Alliance is a national charity and we work with organisations to support disabled people to be active for life. But obviously I've been a trustee for Greater Sport for about 2 years now.
And so why do you think your work is important?
Through Activity Alliance, we obviously understand that disabled people are the least active group amongst our society, so it's really important that we get organisations to think a bit differently and a bit more about disabled people and the gaps and barriers that there might be that they could actually help with. 1 in 5 of us are disabled in society, so actually a lot of our audiences will always be disabled people, so we need to start thinking a bit more creatively and inclusively about the way we deliver programs, research, marketing, to really try and fill those gaps, because it shouldn't be the case that disabled people are twice as likely to be inactive as non-disabled people.
That's such a stark statistic, isn't it, really? Just shows absolutely the inequities in our current system that prevent people from having that activity and those healthy lives and, longer healthy lives that we want for everybody. So that must be it feels particularly stark at the minute. Those current inequalities in COVID light make it much harder for some people to stay active and to keep moving. There's been a lot of noise, a lot of the stay in and work out, and some people are being more active at the minute than they would normally, but I think there's a big disparity between those that can get out, those that can stay active, those that can use YouTube videos. So I'm interested in your insights through your work in terms of what are the current, challenges, but also the opportunities for disabled people at the moment.
We already know that from our own research that psychological barriers are the biggest barrier that prevents disabled people from being active, and that's disabled people themselves as well as the attitudes towards disabled people. We're hearing, obviously, the information we get through our own channels, we're hearing a lot more about the creative ways that you can be active in the home. And for years now, I feel it as a disabled person, is that actually getting out the door can be an issue for a lot of people. So moving activity into the home has been really interesting, especially for me, in that, a can of beans can be used instead of some weights. That people will actually do, bocce, which is a game usually, which you can see in the Paralympics. They're actually reinventing that game and doing things that they can do in the garden. They're doing things like sofa superheroes, where it's a disabled fitness instructor delivering those fitness classes from the sofa. I've been really intrigued and delighted to see that people are actually considering the way you can be active in the home, which for a lot of people is a really important factor, because not all of us can, get on public transport and go into our local gym. And even when we get to our local gym, we might need support there, and will that be available? Can we afford to even do the sport, and activities that are out there? So I think it'll be really important to see how these ideas and creativity carries on past the crisis that we're in right now.
Absolutely. I mean, all those ideas, all that creativity. We've seen lots of, as you said, the cans of beans to all sorts of different ways of creating weights and assault courses and ways of motivating each other to stay active. So what would you like to see happen? What do you think are some of the opportunities for the future, what seeds have been sown at the minute that we could really look to water and continue?
Definitely the active in the home. I think, it's as if it was always a forgotten kind of area of actually, should we be doing more programs that are actually involving activity in the home? When we do online fitness classes, should we be thinking about the tools and the space that we've got in our own homes? But I think there's still a stark reality in terms of digital communications, because my job as marketing manager, I still consider the inclusive marketing angle. And as much as we are embracing the new channels and the digital communications that we all have, not all of us do. So there is still a barrier. And if we think about older age groups or certain impairment groups, won't necessarily have the access to digital communications that you or I do. And there are still barriers in those digital communications. So our websites still aren't as accessible as they should be. Our video calls haven't got subtitles. There are so many good accessible platforms out there. I really hope that when we come out of this, that we continue to use them and actually embrace inclusion in a digital way, because there's so much more that we can do in sport and physical activity and health that we're just not doing right now. And it's really embarrassing for us as sports organisations to not really think about the end user's barrier.
Absolutely. So designing in for inclusion much earlier in all those different spaces, far more consciously, feels like it's absolutely needed. And I share, at points, definitely that embarrassment when you see some things and you think, why, how is it possible in the 21st century when we know, like those stats that you pointed at the beginning, that you're twice likely to be inactive if you're disabled, and the impact that has on people, on their contributions, on their life. We are literally talking about people's lives. So what can you see, how can we make that happen, Sarah? How do we make that happen?
I think it's probably what you've just said as well, that we always advise, we do a lot of work on inclusive marketing and communications, and we always sit back, and when we see websites that are built or campaigns that are built, and you go in afterwards and you say, well, I would have done this, or I would change this, or I would add this. From the beginning, from the get-go, we need to think about inclusion and accessibility. And that means when we do begin those planning stages, that we actually involve disabled people or people with certain barriers, different age groups, different communities in our work, that actually can help us plan effectively and inclusively and accessibly. Because what happens is, the end of that project or the end of that website or the end of that campaign, and somebody says, I can't access it because of this. And then it costs you more to fix that because you haven't done it from day one. So I think it just means putting inclusion at the heart of everything we do from now. If you haven't done it already, you need to ask yourself and your team some questions about, have we got the right platforms? Are we spending enough money on making it inclusive? Are we realistic in actually the audiences we're trying to reach? Because not everyone's digital and not everyone wants to be digital. Not everyone's sitting holding their smartphone to try and be active. That some people might want a leaflet through the door. There are those people still that exist in our society. So let's think a bit more creatively and actually not think about what we need as an organisation, but what the end user needs.
Yeah. So designing in from the very beginning, and that co-design, and making sure that, and again, we've got the full diversity, because being disabled means very different things, doesn't it, for different people, and the needs then that come with that, the opportunities, the strengths that come with that are, hugely diverse. So it certainly isn't one tick box solution where you're going to solve that for everybody. So having that inclusive approach from the very beginning and not an afterthought, which sometimes is how it feels. And we've seen that, I guess, over the last few weeks in terms of I was pleased to see the changes from the government last week in terms of additional exercise for people with autism and potentially other sort of neuro difference. And I pictured back when I was a lawyer working with families with children who were autistic or had ADHD, and they've been very much on my mind over the last few weeks, thinking, my goodness, particularly if you're in crowded conditions, if you don't have a garden and you yourself or a child or somebody else you're looking for, has those particular needs, this could be absolutely exasperating, on top of anxiety, on top of uncertainty, on top of all those changes to normal structures, normal habits, normal support. That's very real, isn't it, for some families? So that was, it was good to see that change, but it was an example of something that was a change several weeks in. It wasn't from the beginning. It clearly wasn't at the forefront of decision makers' minds at the time that they were initially legislating around the lockdown. So we need to have people around the table, don't we? We need to take the learnings from now forward.
And I would say also that, involving disabled people is a really, really good change for your culture as an organisation. And, the employment rates are still low for disabled people. But you go into organisations and you ask, how many disabled people do you have, working with you? Because I know in marketing, the first people I ask are people with different impairments, because I go, do you like this? Is this accessible? The internal insight you can have by involving disabled people, employing disabled people, is massive. And I really hope one of the positive impacts that come out of it is actually people see that disabled people are really adaptable, really effective in terms of giving solutions, because we're used to these sort of things. We're used to not being able to get out the door, and we're used to having to interact digitally or in a different form of channel. But would that not be nice, when we come out of this, that we embrace that?
I really hope so. And I know we had, before we started the interview, a bit of a conversation around the level of kind of humanity and empathy and understanding, and the opportunity at the minute for people to maybe recognise that actually, have a sense of what other people's lives are like. So as people are going, well, isolation feels really hard. And yes, how many disabled people put their hands up and go, yeah, this is my life, actually. I can't get out every day, always, for some people. So how we really hold on to that and enable more people to understand each other, and then remove those barriers really that we have that get in the way, don't they, of people being able to contribute and be involved and participate.
And I think, I'll say it every day, that I really hope when we come out of whatever we're coming out of, and when we come out of it, that we don't forget that social isolation still exists. This might be a real thing to a lot of people who've never experienced it before, but we really need to get a grip of what it means to those people who are still going to be socially isolated. And it affects their activity rating. So, when we talk about, I'm always saying, active people, stop telling me to be more active, because you might not understand how I feel as a less active person, or what my barriers are. So I feel like we need to really come out of this with some kind of ongoing discussion that actually still considers disabled people to be socially isolated, and use the solutions we've used for the last few weeks again, and continue those solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you. So how do you like to move? And has that shifted at all over the last few weeks, as we've seen people have to create new habits? And for some people, their levels of activity have gone up, and for others, it's very dramatically gone down. So what does that look like for you personally?
I'm not kind of like the active bunny that probably people think when you work in sport or physical activity, but certainly for me, it's more of a physio thing. So the movement is more important for me, for my muscles to keep working. So I've been intrigued by things like the social workouts that are existing, and the different inclusive dance routines that you can do online. I'm quite fortunate because my husband is a sports therapist anyway, so he's always got some kind of contraption around the house that you can use, or lift a can of beans instead of a weight. So I'm quite fortunate of who I live with and who we're married to. But certainly I've been doing more of the physio elements of it. It's not like I'm going, around the garden and, doing 100 laps like Captain Tom. And he kind of puts me to shame right now. But certainly I'm probably doing as much activity as I did before. And
so that point you make there about how fortunate you are in terms of your partner, I'm sure in many ways, without embarrassing him, but in terms of that support that we all rely on, and I know just in terms of my own family, in terms of trying to get my kids moving, but also them inspiring me, to be honest, and reminding me, have I done my press ups for the day? So again, if you're living on your own, that must be so much harder at the minute. So are you getting sort of feedback through your work, through your networks, about what that looks and feels like for people right now?
You know what? I mean, as much as there is a negative side to it, and definitely there are people out there that are feeling quite low right now, and being active is not a priority. We kind of forget. We put all these, lots of, messages out there about, come on, be active, that hour a day. But for some people, they're quite low right now, and that's not just disabled people. And trying to encourage them and just be active, it's good for you. It was so kind of like feeling a bit more positive about my life, but it's not priority. So we are hearing negative stories, obviously, in terms of people feeling quite down and isolated and without support to do things. But we're also hearing really nice stories about, actually, I've now got a wealth of activities I can do that I'm doing my own thing with. So the things like Joe Wicks, as much as he hasn't put on an inclusive PE class for children in the morning, there are families that know how to adapt those classes and are doing it themselves. So I've seen brilliant videos of children who are disabled just changing it a little bit, changing that routine that Joe Wicks delivers and making it good for themselves. I've heard from people that have never been active before suddenly being active because they've got access to it online. And also there's a lot of people that, whether disabled or not, that feel quite self-conscious. So actually doing it in your home when you can boost your confidence a bit more possibly is a good thing, in terms of actually the next step might be getting out and doing it in the local leisure centre, because you've got rid of those sort of initial feelings that you don't feel that confident in being active, or will I look silly when I do it. So there are positive sides to it. I just think we all need to be very conscious that there's quite a lot of people that still feel that activity is not for them.
And that messaging, which obviously you're an expert in, which is why I'm so grateful to have the conversation, but also to have you on our Greater Sport board, because it is such a challenge, isn't it? I'm constantly, whether it's as an organisation, we're thinking about our marketing and comms, but every time I send a tweet, I'm kind of going, absolutely, I firmly believe that it's right that doing a daily dose of exercise is up there along with medication and access to food. We know the stats tell us, what this means in terms of helping the nation stay fit and healthy, how important that is now, both for your physical and mental health, how that enables us to sustain isolation for much longer if we're able to stay physically active, and how that will also in the end will ultimately could save lives, because, whether it's if it's COVID in another form or it's something else, what we've seen is that, if you're fit and active, you're more likely to be able to have, your symptoms are likely to be lower and likely to have a, less of an impact, and may even be life-saving for you. So it does feel important. It's hugely important, but as you say, that can feel like a preachy message, can't it really? It can land completely wrong. It can feel like you're shaming people. It can feel like if you're living in very difficult circumstances and just getting food to you and to your kids, if you're in a cramped household, the idea of lifting a can of beans, and somebody telling you on Twitter, here you go, here's some nice moves, here's a good dance, can feel so incongruous with the realities of your life. So how to get that balance of reminding people that it is important, it shouldn't be a luxury just for some, it absolutely is something that everybody should be able to access, but recognizing the realities for people really, and messaging that reaches different people in all their diversity is a challenge. It's like a real challenge.
And I think it really depends on who delivers that message to. So, you can have the Olympians and Paralympians of the world who are brilliant, and there will be definitely that percentage of people that want to go on and, do some elite sport and, become medal winners. But there's a whole heap of us who are just rubbish at sport, but just want to find that activity for our muscle movement. We like to say disabled people have a right to be as rubbish at sport as anybody else. But being active is a good thing. We know that. We know the benefits, the physical and mental benefits of being active. But the phrase "people like me," we need to find those people like me who, are a bit chubby, but still actually want to be active, but that have experienced life as we do in our daily lives. It's really important that those people come through and actually deliver those messages for us. And that could be anybody. That could be a health professional. It could be your local GP, but it could be also, somebody who runs your local church, or it can really vary. But we all have different people that we listen to. It's not necessarily the people that we think should deliver those messages. And we need to do a lot more work on those messengers.
So there we go. We need to involve from the very beginning, at the heart of everything, have that inclusion, absolutely leading the way and not an afterthought. And then also making sure that we're seeing, you can't be what you can't see. And in the end, we need that diversity of people to be giving those messages, our key advocates out there. And they're far more persuasive than any one of us trying to reach a whole host of different people in their different households right now. So let's make it happen. Let's see this. I love your positivity. It's absolutely great, and I know there are a lot of challenges at the minute for lots of people, but as you say, there are these positive things that are happening at the minute, and opportunities really to make sure that we take that learning and embed it in the ways of the future, and really close that gap. So we're not saying that you're twice as likely to be inactive if you're disabled, and let's shift that. So thank you very much for your time. Lovely to talk to you as ever, and I hope the next few weeks go well, and I look forward to catching up really and talking about what next, and taking all that learning and going, how do we make sure at Greater Sport with GM Moving really that we put those things in action and work with you to do that. So
great.
Cheers.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, why not share it or tell a friend about it? And if you've got feedback or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch with our team at Greater Sport using the links that you'll find on our podcast page.